Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to address my first question to John, if I might. And you were talking about some of the renewable resources and alternative fuels and ethanol in particular. In your analysis of ethanol, when we look at the cost as a nation of ethanol compared to producing gasoline, can you tell me if there is a cost difference between getting that product to market?
The cost difference in getting the product to the market.
Or even producing it.
There we go. Well, the cost of producing, obviously, today, gasoline and diesel fuel are refined from petroleum. The single largest cost in producing those refined products is crude oil prices. When you're looking at ethanol or you're looking at biodiesel, again, the feedstock, whether it's corn or sugar in the case of other countries, or soybean oil, is the most significant cost item in producing those products as well. The biofuels industry in the United States is still relatively young. The relative cost of production for ethanol versus gasoline is still somewhat higher than gasoline is. Mm-hmm. We do have federal incentives in place, a volumetric ethanol excise tax credit, the VTEC, which provides a credit to the blender who buys ethanol to blend with gasoline and helps keep that product competitive with gasoline. The real issue here is perhaps not so much today's basic economics, which clearly I believe are favoring the use of biofuels, but as we move forward into the future, because as we increase our reliance and dependence on producing biofuels and the role that they play, those prices are going to come down, and it's going to retain its competitiveness and improve the economic benefit to consumers across the board.
And that was my question, I guess, because I've heard that it's like 3 to 1 for production cost of ethanol to gasoline, and just actually producing it and getting it to the marketplace. It's more expensive.
It's more expensive. I don't think it's 3 to 1. I think the number is probably closer to 1.5, 2 to 1 today, in terms of just flat-out production and distribution costs.
But if you add in the tax incentives that we have, what does that cause the difference? If
you add the tax incentives that are in place for ethanol today, then as we indicated, when you take a look at the cost of distributing, that is from the refinery to the consumer, when you blend 10% ethanol with gasoline in 2007, it provided a 10.3% benefit to consumers. The price of ethanol blended gasoline was 10.3% lower than it would have been without the use of ethanol, and we expect that number is going to be about 10 cents in 2008 as well. And when you move forward through time, and we've looked at this through 2017, we're looking at an average a benefit that's somewhere in the area of about 8 cents a gallon. So when you take all factors into consideration, production and distribution for gasoline, and compare that with production and distribution of ethanol and the blending of those, the consumer benefits from the use of ethanol, biofuels.
And I am all for looking at other sources of energy and biodiesel and renewable energy, all of the things that we need to be looking at. Dr. Orczyk, if I could ask you a question. I know as an economics expert, can you talk to us a little bit about what we can do to reduce the price of gasoline and cost on businesses in America?
Well, clearly, alternative fuels like ethanol are part of the solution, but they're only part of the solution. And there is a sidebar to that that's a problem. We're one of the few countries in the world wealthy enough to actually use corn, which the rest of the world uses for food, to use for fuel. One of the reasons you're seeing an increase in food prices, you can ask any American household, is because we're now using corn as a fuel alternative as well as a food source. And that is really affecting the price of milk and beef and everything else. The solutions are, and frankly, it's pretty simple. The world is driven by oil, like it or not, and it's going to be driven by oil for a long, long time. We just can't stop all the cars and trucks we have. By the way, we're talking about $3 a gallon gas. We're actually talking about $4 a gallon diesel, which really affects trucking. But the long-term solution is increased exploration, more drilling, because the world is driven by oil and gas. And as I said earlier, in Pennsylvania now, wells that were locked up for a long time just weren't worth the trouble. As in Oklahoma, farmers and ranchers who quite often made money off the wells that paid them royalties on their property. That money now is subsidizing the cost of farming and ranching. It is also all the products they buy are delivered by trucks. So again, part of the problem also has a solution that causes another problem. The only real long-term solution is to increase production and to find alternatives. The research for alternatives is being funded by the profits that oil and gas companies make. So while we may not like this, that is the long-term solution to a very difficult short-term problem.